Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I'm joined by Greg, also of Hail Varsity, and we are live here at Memorial Stadium, and we are here for another recruiting question of the week. So I guess I should have actually introduced you as recruiting extraordinaire. I could see the disappointment.
I felt weird, like it felt a little strange.
I felt the disappointment just exuding from you on that moment. It's okay.
I was upset.
Recruiting extraordinaire. Greg, this week's question is actually one that is sort of a combination of a lot of your questions. So over the last week, Nebraska has seen a decommitment from the 2022 class. Obviously, a lot of you have shared thoughts, concerns, you name it on this. And so we are just going to sort of take all of that and turn it into a question, which is, what happens if there's more decommitments? And what do we need to know about this? So let's just start here, Greg. Nebraska's class is small to begin with. It makes things a little bit more dicey. What happens if this happens again?
And when you say dicey, it means that the margin for error in this class is very small. There's like no pun intended because the class is so small. So when you have a class that may reach 14 at max, you just don't have a lot of room to have misses within the recruiting class, right? And that's why so many fans were hoping to see that this class would be basically Nebraska going after a lot of big fish, so to speak, to be able to fill up the class to bring the average star ranking up so that you can get excited about a class that will be potentially smaller but still have some impact players. It's been kind of a roll of the dice on if that's happened or not. I think Schwartz was actually one of the more sought-after players. Hayden Schwartz, the recent decommit, the defensive lineman out of Florida. I think he had 37 different scholarship offers, and collected more along the way. And so it's been a really interesting situation to see that moving forward, to see which way Nebraska will go to try to fill that particular spot, right? Because they could go for another high school defensive lineman to try to fill it, but at the same time, there are a lot of veteran defensive linemen that are scheduled to return next year. And so you just have to kind of balance that out on how you do with that particular decommitment. But it is a fear based on how the season is going that you would end up having more decommitments.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where we kind of have alluded to this, or actually spoken pretty directly about it in these recruiting videos, that the results on the field do affect recruiting, and right now Nebraska is 3-5, and that's going to be something where when recruits aren't able to necessarily see something for themselves, if you can't show them what they're going to get from the deal, they may not be as willing to commit to that at that point. So, if Nebraska, say, goes on a really great run down this stretch, which would be very difficult, there are some really great opponents remaining on the schedule. But let's say Nebraska pulls off that miracle, it happens, you maybe then see some interest return. It's interesting, I think a lot of the concerns have been that this was a decommitment on the defensive side of things where things are going so well. I do think in his case, probably the overall team performance probably played a little bit of a factor, but you also did mention Nebraska has a lot of really solid defensive linemen returning, and that is his spot. So it could be an area where it was like, one, playing time, two, what can the team do with me? I think there's probably a lot wrapped up in that.
And I think there's a little bit of, as you guys have read Big Red Recon, you also know that there's a little bit of him looking around a little bit as well, and wanting to take other visits, and we're not necessarily sure if Nebraska was okay with that, which does happen from time to time as well. But as Erin was mentioning, team performance I think is a really big factor in all of this, and it's not just that it's this year. It's that this is year 4 of Scott Frost, and you're 3-5 at this point, and you really question the direction of the program. And I think that that's a fair question for recruits to have, and what's going to happen with me in my future. And so I think that that's a legitimate concern that they really have. And it is notable that that one has been that was on the defensive side, given how well the defense has played so far.
If you're wondering what's next, the answer is really it's going to be a wild ride to the early signing period, and then even probably into the the traditional signing day in February. So, I mean, if you're a recruiting fan, you're going to definitely want to keep it locked at hailvarsity.com and with all of Greg's content, because there's going to be a lot to come, a lot to sort of settle and sort out. Yeah,
there'll definitely be a lot because there's so many moving parts, whether it's the high school recruiting, whether it's coaches going into junior college, the transfer portal it is a stated part of the strategy at this point, and Nebraska will need to do very well with guys who basically will need a handful of Samari Toure level contributors would be the goal, and so there'll be a lot going on running through December and then into February.
If you want more on this particular topic, you can always head to hailvarsity.com tonight at 6 p.m. Central. The recruiting notebook goes live, and on Mondays, Greg dives into this particular question or topic from the recruiting question of the week and just gives you more insight. So make sure to head to hailvarsity.com, 6 p.m. Central. But again, Sunday through Thursday is when the recruiting notebook goes live, and this is when a lot of these topics get addressed. In fact, I do already know, if you don't, some of your questions have been answered in those notebooks. So if you aren't actively going and checking those out, please do, because you might just see something that you're like, oh, there's my question. But we do appreciate you commenting here on YouTube, leaving your comments on Facebook. You also send them to us on Twitter. You can always tweet at Greg, at GregSmithHV, or at Hail Varsity. You can send it to me at Erin Sorensen, but I'm going to send them back to Greg anyway. But we always appreciate you just continuing this conversation, asking questions, because, well, as we sort of point out every week, like, recruiting doesn't stop, and this is certainly an interesting recruiting season for Nebraska. So
definitely is.
There's no reason not to also just subscribe to this channel while you're here. So as always, we appreciate you for tuning in. Keep those comments coming, those questions coming. Greg, thank you for being our recruiting extraordinaire.
Thank you for remembering. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I totally threw him off. All right. Have a great day. We will talk to you later.